Many years ago, in the beautiful city of Lagos, there lived a very handsome boy named Andy. Andy was living with his grandma. While Andy was living with his grandma, he often goes out to hawk pure water. One fateful afternoon, Andy had gone out to hawk pure water as usual. But while at it, a man putting on a black suit walked up to him and told him that he wanted to get water. And he wanted to get everything Andy was carrying on his head. Andy was glad and even followed this man to his vehicle. But the moment Andy got close to the vehicle, the man carried Andy and left. And that was the last time his grandma ever laid an eye on Andy. This man who had carried Andy, his name was Kanayo. Kanayo was a mafia. He was into cocaine, hard drugs, various kind of things, illegal importation of cars. Kanayo was in the market. Kanayo had carried Andy because he needed to groom boys. That was what Kanayo does. He gets boys as little as 10, 11, 12, and he starts grooming them to work for him. He teaches them how to make use of gun, how to defend themselves. But when it came to Andy, everything was different. All the boys Kanayo had gotten knew how to shoot gun, knew how to use knife. Andy was like his baby. He did not teach Andy how to shoot gun. Instead, he taught Andy how to market, how to lay stakes, how to bring in consignments. These consignments we're talking about are cocaines, illegal cars, drugs, chemicals, various things. So Andy was more like the educated person among the area boys. He was the only one Kanayo practically sat down to teach how to calculate, how to do business, how to negotiate. Most of the boys were envious of him. Most of them felt like they were giving him preferential treatment. But Andy wasn't bothered. He didn't like the environment. He didn't like the fact that he gets to see young girls smuggle drugs. He felt irritated with it. But after he had stayed with Kanayo for a total of 20 years, he had to accept his fate. He was now into this. In fact, he enjoyed doing business and running transactions. Money, big money was coming his way. Kanayo made sure to pay his boys equally. And the moment Kanayo kicked the bucket, Andy became next in line to take up the market. So everyone gave Andy maximum respect. None of them knew how to handle the business. None of them knew other things that were involved. None of them even knew secret accounts of Kanayo. It was just Andy. Andy became the Don, receiving consignment from left, right, center, sending in cocaine to politicians' children. But one peculiar thing about Andy was the fact that he cared for children. He did not want to live the same life Kanayo did. He did not want to involve any small child into this dirty and shady business. Any young guy that was walking into that place and wanted to join them must be someone 18 years and above, someone who already knew his left from his right, someone who had chosen to risk his life for money. That was something Andy stood by. Andy also made out time to reach out to the poor, to the orphans. He tried to locate his grandma when he had taken over, but he found out that she died. He had taken flower to her grave, apologized and cried. He had laid complaints there and often asked for her blessings. He already knew he was bad and there was nothing that can be done. One fateful evening, the consignments they had imported was cleared, the money complete, every check and balance was done, and they decided to marry. But while at it, unknown to them, that someone had already spoken to the police. Someone was already working with the police. While they were in the midst of marrying, a little misunderstanding happened within two different people. And while Andy was trying to settle it, a gunshot from nowhere hit him on the left side of his stomach. And that was how everyone started shooting gun. Andy looked for a way to escape, but there was no way. Because when he got towards the outside of the door, he noticed that policemen were there. So he decided to jump from the fence. But the moment he jumped, he entered into another lady's compound. That was the saving grace. When he was jumping into the compound, he had landed on a stone, making his case very, very severe. While he was lying there, lifeless, helpless, praying to his dead grandma to come save him, as this wasn't the way he had looked forward to dying, this beautiful young lady, Bridget Tomike, came out of her house to get her pizza package. And lo and behold, she saw a man lying flat in front of her home. She quickly rushed the man in. But while she was trying to understand what was going on with the stranger, she had put on the television and she found out that there was a serious armed robbery going on around her vicinity. Unknown to her, the news wasn't the truth. The policemen were trying to catch the mafians, being Andy and his boys, but they just concluded that they were armed robbers. At first, Tomike felt that this man must be one of the armed robbers. But she told herself that it was better to save him first, then she can as well send him to the police or even invite the police to come pick him up. So she put her mind and focus into saving Andy. Because of the news she had heard, she didn't want to take him to the hospital. She decided to carry out the surgery in her home, being that she was a surgeon. Tomike handled the surgery all on her own. A surgery that would have taken her 2 hours 30 minutes if she was working with assistant doctors and nurses took her almost 5 hours. At some point, she became scared if Andy was going to make it. But Andy made it. The surgery came out fine and Andy gradually started recovering. Though it took Andy a whole long time to open his eyes. And the very day he opened his eyes, he saw Tomike, a beautiful damsel, standing in front of him and injecting something into his drip. He opened his eyes and greeted her, "Good day." Tomike looked at him and said, "Finally, you are awake. You got me scared. I thought something must have gone wrong with the surgery, but I'm glad you are awake." At first, Andy thought he was in the hospital, but this didn't look like a hospital to him, and he turned and asked her, "Who are you?" Tomike smiled and said, "Your savior." Andy said, "Thank you for saving me." So with the passing days, Andy gradually recovered, and he wanted to leave Tomike's house. Tomike did not hold him back. She only passed the information she had heard from the news, that most of his men were dead. And Andy asked her, "Who do you think I am?" Tomike said, "I don't know, but I guess you're an armed robber, because from what we heard in the news, there was a robbery attack that happened in this place and most of the men involved were dead." Andy started crying. He felt bad. His boys were there. So if most of those boys were dead, that means most of his boys, most of the people he grew up with, most of his friends, most of his G's were dead. Andy shedded tears, but he didn't want it to get the better part of him. He started thinking of a way out. More information he had gotten from Tomike was the fact that his face never appeared among the men they were looking for. And she was really surprised, being that Andy was able to escape before the police invaded the premises. So no one captured his face. So Andy decided to stay with Tomike for the time being. He needed to observe the environment. He needed to observe the coast to be sure if the coast was clear for him to move to his own home. He was doing this gradually. Whenever Tomike was going out, he tended to go out and check and know if there was any police around his home or anything, but there was none. The very day he had made up his mind that he was going to return, that was on a Sunday morning, he saw Tomike going to church, and he quickly asked her, "Where are you going to?" And Tomike said, "I am going to church." And Andy asked her to do what? And Tomike said, "To meet Jesus." Andy asked her, "Who is Jesus?" And Tomike smiled and said, "Do you want to know him? If you want to know him, then you have to follow me to the church." Andy did not refuse. Instead, he obliged and followed her. And that very day, when Andy came to church, that was the day he received Jesus. Because the songs that were sung in the church, the hymn, what a friend we have in Jesus, everything was dragging his soul to God. Even the preaching for that day was unique. It wasn't about financial problem of the church. Rather, even the preaching for that day was unique. It wasn't about financial problem of the church. Rather, it was a verse that was teaching people about Christ. The preacher kept on reminding people that Christ had said, "Come unto me, all you who are weak and heavy landed, for I will give you strength, for I will give you peace." And he listened carefully. He had never, ever walked into a church ever since Kanayo picked him up. So this felt new. He saw himself in a different trance entirely. And after church for that day, he looked at Tomike and said that he will always want to be here. And with the passing days, Andy always went to the church with Tomike. Be it midweek service, be it Sunday school, whatsoever. Andy followed Tomike to the church. He had received Christ and he wanted to work towards changing his lifestyle. He wanted to work towards living a better life. But with the passing days, with Andy and Tomike always getting to see one another, Andy gradually started developing feelings for her. But he wasn't sure if Tomike was going to accept his feelings, being that he was a bad guy. But he told himself that he needed to get closer to Tomike in order to express his feelings to her. Something that Andy noticed was that Tomike had an issue with placing her priority right. Tomike might want to get a woman here and she will starve herself, all because she wanted to save to get a woman here. Andy gradually started teaching her management, how to manage your wealth in such a way that it doesn't affect a particular lifestyle. Tomike loved how intelligent he was when it comes to money. She never knew that he was that smart. At least something she was sure was that Andy did not go to school because he said he had never gone to school. But the way he spoke about money, you will know that Andy was wealthy. Very, very wealthy. He was very, very calculative and he knew how to plan. He knew how to strategize when it comes to money. He was already used to all this. He was a mafia. He was used to selling hard drugs and their money must be complete. Tomike loved that part of Andy and she gradually started getting attracted to him. The very day Andy had expressed his feelings to Tomike, he wasn't sure if she was going to accept, but Tomike accepted. Because she wasn't seeing him as Andy Androba anymore. She told him to his face, "You're a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, you're new. So if you're going to stick with God, then I'm going to stick by you." We don't judge people for who they were. It's about who you are now and who you want to be in the future. And he was glad. It took him a whole lot of courage to express his feelings to Tomike. After Tomike had accepted Andy's proposal, Tomike introduced Andy to her parents, who already knew Andy from the church. They had observed him as a new-timer who gradually became a member of the church. They had even invited him for dinner. During this dinner, they gradually asked Andy about himself. Andy said little about himself, knowing fully well that he couldn't tell Tomike's parents that he was a mafian or he was into the drug market. He smiled and said that he was a businessman. But they weren't really interested in so much things about him. They were just grateful that their daughter had found someone that she really loved. And because he said he was a businessman, they accepted it. They didn't encroach much in his life or anything. They even gave their blessings and told them that they should go to the church in order to start their marriage class, to which Andy and Tomike did. This marriage class went on for a period of 3 months. During this period, Andy gradually learned things that he never knew. Learning about Christ, how Christ was the husband of the church, so many things he never really knew as a growing child, being that he wasn't even exposed to church. He learned it and he was ready to carry on all these activities when he gets married to Tomike. The wedding preparations were gradually coming together. And they also mentioned to Tomike and her family that he was an orphan. He had even taken Tomike to his grandmother's grave. So there was no one argument for it. And after they were done with the marriage class, they had gone to the courts to register their marriage. After the marriage was registered, Andy decided to get himself a lawyer. He gradually spoke to a young man who was willing to listen to him. He had explained to him that he knew that illegal businesses couldn't register their property, but he would love to register his properties and he would want to will everything about him to his wife Tomike. This lawyer put him through on what and what not to do, how to go about it, how to clear his name, things that were necessary for him to do in order for Tomike to be able to be his next of kin, peradventure, if anything happens to him. Andy went on with all necessary filing documentation and next of kin was properly registered. Few weeks down the line, Andy and Tomike got married in a very beautiful and simple way. A very beautiful wedding. Tomike was happy. She was at peace with herself. She had even taken leave from work. Andy wanted to spoil her silly. They had traveled to Dubai for a vacation/honeymoon. They wanted to enjoy themselves, get to know one another more. And the moment they returned, Tomike and Andy moved to a different apartment entirely, a new home. It was different from Tomike's home and different from that which Andy used to live in. Andy had even sold that other property he used to live in, so he had gotten a new place for he and his wife to start life all afresh. They were always happy. Andy was gradually going to his office, but not as a mafian. He had even gotten himself a new office. He was thinking about getting a new line, a new business line, probably be an investor to people's businesses since he already had the money. Just invest in various businesses and yield profit one way or the other, be shareholders to different companies. He had already strategized what to do. He already had the money in place. He just needed people to invest in their businesses. Gradually, he was getting people. But whoever comes his way needed to present a real business, not play. Something real, something genuine, something that was going to profit in life. With the passing days and months, Andy had invested in 2 businesses. He was okay. He was glad. This was something that took a while, but it was something he was enjoying. He never knew or expected that someday, sometime, he was going to come out from being a drug lord. So, he was enjoying every bit of each day. But you know, peace doesn't always last. 6 months down their marriage, Tomike noticed that someone was always following her, but she wasn't sure who this person was. One day, she had told her husband that it feels like she's being followed, and he looked at her and said, "By who? I'm not sure anyone knows you to the extent of wanting to follow you. Or is it your patient?" Tomike said, "No, this isn't a patient. I know I am being followed, like someone is monitoring my day-to-day activities." And he told her not to worry, that he was going to look into it. One fateful evening, while Tomike was sleeping, Andy decided to take a stroll around his compound. And lo and behold, they were being followed and monitored. As Andy was standing there, someone jumped into the compound and he quickly caught the person. It was his boy, Mark. And he quickly greeted Mark. "Mark, boy, how far? How have you been? Where have you been? I've searched for all you people everywhere." Mark smiled and said, Boss, you just forgot everybody." And he said, "No, I didn't. I searched for you people. I looked for you people. I even went to the office. I went everywhere." Mark said, "Boss, you did not. If you did, you would have located us. You know all our hidden corners now. Andy still tried to explain that he was seriously injured, and after that, he tried to reach out. Mark just said, okay, I just wanted you to know that I'll be there and you know where to meet us. Auntie said, no problem. I'm going to come around tomorrow. So the next day, Auntie left the house very early and went to meet his boys. He was really glad to see Mark and Linus. And they started talking, conversing. They had offered him whiskey and he refused to drink. He just wanted to catch up with them. And they quickly started asking, so how are we going to go back to the market? We've been looking for you because you're the only one that had access to everything. But they noticed the auntie had his own reservation. He didn't want to get involved with any shitty deals again. Mark and Linus looked at themselves and said, boss, is everything okay? Auntie said, yes, I'm changed now. I don't want to do all those things anymore. They laughed loud and said, you must be joking, right? You, the drug lord. Auntie, you're joking now, you're joking, Linus quickly said. But Auntie said, no, I'm not. When they were done catching up, Auntie pleaded with Mark not to follow them anymore, that his wife wasn't comfortable with it, as his wife had noticed that someone was following her. Mark said, no problem. They all smiled about it, and Auntie went home, returning to his day-to-day activities, like as if nothing had happened. That was when Linus looked at Mark and asked him, are you sure this person was not the person that told us off to the police? But Mark said, I'm not sure our boss would do that. Linus laughed and said, I think you're still behaving like a baby. You trust him too much that you don't know that he can be the person, or you don't believe that he can be the person. Mark said, I don't think he is the person. Our boss will not do that. Then Linus looked at Mark and said, if he's not the person, then tell me how he had just decided to wake up one day and stop. He had even gotten married. He's living his life like a full-grown adult, like he is a legal worker. Can you imagine that human being? Mark said, somehow you're correct, because we're always in the hiding. And from the look of things, he's walking the street of Lagos freely. And Linus looked at Mark and said, then we have to remind him who he is. We have to bring out the Andy in him. What does he mean? That he just gives up. For what? Has he forgotten the rule? There is no way out. The only way out is death. Mark said, okay, no problem. Hope you're not planning to kill him, or it's just to shake him small. Of course, now we know that Auntie cannot handle it all. We'll just shake him small to remind him who he is. And so they accepted. And a few weeks down the line, they had invited Andy to come hang out with them in the evening. Andy had given the excuse that he couldn't, as he doesn't go out of his house when it was past 7. But Mark kept on pushing and pushing, so Andy decided to come. But when he got to the location, he noticed that this was an uncompleted building, a total different place from where they used to meet. Andy was a bit skeptical, but he wanted to trust them. He had always been the ogre over them, so he followed Mark upstairs. And when they got to the edge of the cliff, Linus came out from nowhere with gun and pointed it straight at Andy. Andy was confused and said, Linus, put that down now. What's the meaning of that? And he said, Andy, you're not my boss anymore, you know. You know the rule of this game. The only thing that can separate you from this dirty game is death. Are you in or out? Andy said, Linus, stop that thing. I'm being serious. I'm a Christian now. I can't go back to that thing. Linus cocked the trigger and pointed it at him and told him, I have 1 bullet here with 4 empty space. I will keep pulling it, and if you don't make a decision, I'm sorry if the trigger hits you. Andy was shocked. This has never happened before. What was going on here? He tried to reason with them, but Linus was certain that was the only way to bring Andy back to his real self. He kept on going and going, and unfortunately, he pulled the trigger really, and it fell from the cliff to the floor. Linus started panicking. That wasn't the plan. He never knew that it was close to the point of the trigger. He only felt that the next pulling would be the bullet. He felt bad about it, but nothing happened. He told himself. Mark was confused. Mark didn't know what to believe anymore. And he looked at Linus and said, How come you did this to him? You told me that you just wanted to shake him small. Linus said, the deed had already been done. It's not my fault. Moreover, that is even the real thing. If he's out, then he's dead. That's it. And Mark felt bad. He really felt bad. Tomike waited throughout the night for her husband, but she didn't see him. She had called his line numerous times. It was ringing, but no one was speaking. And few minutes, someone had called her that her husband was rushed to the hospital. And when she got to the hospital, Andy was lying there. The doctors were trying to help him, but it was late because Andy had already kicked the bucket. Tomike cried. Tomike wailed. Tomike could not even believe what had happened. She didn't even know who to blame. She didn't even know what had caused her husband's death. But few months after the burial, a lawyer had walked up to her and given her Andy's will, as Andy drew his will before what happened. He had willed everything he had to her. But while she was crying, after receiving Andy's will, she threw up. And when she got to the hospital, she found out that she was pregnant. This was another breaking point of her life. Pregnant? And where is Andy? Nowhere. Tomike carried this pregnancy all alone to the very end of it. And she gave birth to a bouncing baby boy, who she named Jaden. Jaden grew up not knowing his father, but he felt the presence of his father, as Tomike always fed him with good news about his father, how his father was the best man on earth, how his father always stood by them, how his father was everything, how his father was a true Christian. Even if she never knew what had happened to her husband, she knew that her husband died a Christian. Thank you very much for listening to this short and beautiful story of the day. Please, I would like you to share what you've learned. Do you think that Linus intended to kill Andy from the start, or do you think it was really a mistake? And like they say, it's not easy to leave a cult. It's always never easy to leave a cult. No matter how hard they try, those cults will always come back haunting the person. Please share your thoughts in the comment section. Till we see you again in our next story, we'll still remain your favorite storyteller, Zika. Bye for now.